Good morning. Oh, thank you. On behalf of Congregation Beth Shalom Rodfei Tzedek, welcome. I'm Rabbi Marcy Bellows, and it is such a joy to gather this morning to honor someone who has made an extraordinary contribution to our wider community and who is also a cherished member of our synagogue family, Michael Roth. Michael Roth's work has exemplified a commitment to peace and justice, among the most fundamental values in Jewish tradition. Through his leadership, writing, teaching, and public engagement, he has demonstrated how education can be a force for understanding and dialogue and a more just society. The Book of Psalms teaches, Bakesh Shalom v'rodvehu, seek peace and pursue it. Most things come to us if we wait for them, just keep waiting. But peace is different. Peace requires active effort. The rabbis taught that if peace is nearby, seek it there. If it is far away, pursue it there. We're called not merely to hope for peace, but to go after it. Today we gather to honor a leader whose work reflects that sacred calling. Our congregation's name, Beth Shalom Rodfei Tzedek, means house of peace, pursuers of justice. We understand these ideals not simply as aspirations, but as obligations. Each of us is called to participate in the holy work of building a more just and a peaceful world. That work requires daily acts of leadership, integrity, and courage. It requires a willingness to build bridges across differences, to defend the dignity of every single person, and to create communities where learning, dialogue, and human flourishing can thrive. It is a true honor, Michael, to present you this morning with a CBSRZ kippah. You may already have one, but now you have a special one from today, made up, of course, comprised of our beautiful ark created by Saul LeWitt. So this is for you, if you want to come on up.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. You may. May today's celebration inspire all of us to renew our commitment to this sacred work and the ongoing task of tikkun olam, repairing our broken world. I'd now like to invite up Susan Peck.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susan Peck, and I've had the honor of serving as chair of the 2026 CBSRZ Pursuers of Peace, Philip Scheffler Pursuers of Peace and Justice Award. I can't tell you how many times I've said that, and I usually say it perfectly. Well, we are so happy to have this wonderful crowd, a very eclectic crowd, I have to say, to celebrate Michael Roth as the fourth recipient of our award. But before I tell you about the history of the award, I just want to thank a few people, my committee in particular, Rabbi Bellows, who served on the committee, Alan Appel, Stephen Davis, Bruce Josephi, Ramsey Scheffler-Claff, Ellen Nodelman, Michael Price, and Michael Prigoff. So I also want to thank our staff for doing the amazing work to get us to where we need to get to. Wendy Byer, our temple administrator, and her assistant, Debbie St. John, who's here with us today, doing a terrific job. There are several others to thank just briefly who would, in these events, would not be as special as they are if we didn't have these folks to provide the expertise that they do. Belinda Brennan, our cantor, Erica Udoff, and David Zalesnik. So thank you. David is our Zoom guy and our volunteer photographer today. He doesn't do that as a living, but he's really good at it. And, of course, there are always many others, too numerous to mention, who are assisting us today. So our Peace and Justice Award originated in 2015 to highlight the ongoing commitment of this congregation to the pursuit of peace and justice in Jewish tradition and in our community. The name of the award, as the rabbi indicated to you, is derived from the name of our blended congregation, Beth Shalom, House of Peace, Roth Tzedek, Pursuers of Justice. In 2016, the award was renamed to honor the memory of the extraordinary journalist, Phil Scheffler, who passed away that year at the age of 86. Phil began his life in journalism as the first television street reporter for CBS News, where he went on to work for 52 years. Phil spent most of those years at 60 Minutes. There is irony in the fact that this historic program has been so prominent in the news this past week, although not in a good way. Because of these news reports, though, I felt compelled to tell you a little bit about Phil's experience there. In 1980, Phil became a senior producer of 60 Minutes and eventually its executive editor. In these capacities, Phil had a direct hand in producing every 60 Minutes report broadcast from 1980 to 2003, when he retired. Along with executive producer Dawn Hewitt, 60 Minutes became not just a premier news program, but one of the most respected, popular, and long-standing programs in television history. For those of us lucky enough to know him, Phil was committed to the highest ideals of journalism. His commitment to the truth and facts were uncompromising. And Phil loved this congregation. Although he would complain that there was not enough English in services, his deep and resonant voice, singing and reciting prayers in Hebrew was always one of the strongest. He contributed to the life of this congregation in many ways. He was present for holidays and Friday night services when he was here in his part-time home in Essex, which was very frequently. He was involved in most of our most memorable programs over the years. Phil was the moving force who kickstarted the endowment fund to help secure the financial viability of the congregation by creating a limited series of prints of our iconic Ark cover behind me, signed and numbered and donated by the artist and fellow congregant Saul LeWitt. For these reasons, when Phil passed away in 2016, it seemed imperative to attach his name to this award. Particularly when we have the good fortune to be presenting the award to someone like Michael Roth. We honor Michael today for his vision, his voice, and his actions in these perilous times that echo the cherished values and ideals which underlie the Peace and Justice Award. Before I conclude, I just want to thank we have some of our public officials here today, and I want to thank them for being here. We have our First Selectman, Cindy Lignar, here in Chester, and Selectman Paul Radici, also of Chester. I don't know if we have anyone. I wasn't able to see who checked in, so if we have anyone else, any other public official here, please, at some point, if you'll make yourself known to me, I would appreciate it. So I now invite Ethan Kleinberg, our congregant and Wesleyan University class of 1958 Distinguished Professor of History and Letters, to introduce Michael Roth and present the 2026 Philip Scheffler Pursuers of Peace and Justice Award.
So, can everybody hear me? Let's get this right. Actually, when I walked in, I was feeling like on top of the world, but then Chloe said to me, she said, "You nervous?" And I thought, no. And then I thought, well, maybe I am. What happens when you mess up the introduction for your boss? Well, we're going to find out. So, as you've gleaned from that remark, Michael is the president of Wesleyan University, where he's served since 2007. I actually have seniority on Michael in that regard. I've been there since 2001, though I see some people who've been there even longer than me. But I did want to mention that I've known Michael much longer than that, because when I was a graduate student at UCLA, and Michael was a professor at Scripps College, I was working on my dissertation, and I met him at a party at another professor's house, and he asked me what I was working on and what I was doing. And as he found out what I was working on, he said, "You know, I've got some contacts for you. I've got actually some sources that would be, I think, really helpful for your dissertation and your work." And it may not be the same now, but at least then my experience was that historians were pretty guarded about their sources, especially if they were the only ones who had access to them. But Michael wasn't. He was incredibly generous. He was incredibly helpful. He really didn't know me from Adam, but he really wanted to help me out and help me succeed in my work. And I say that because it's really the case that Michael is a mensch. He's a mensch. But that's not why we're here. Because there are lots of mensches, mention. There's lots of mensches. We'd like that there were more, but there are plenty. No. We're here because Michael is a mensch with the courage of his convictions. He's someone who is willing to stand up for what is right and stand against injustice, no matter the cost. And this is something I think much more rare, especially right now. At a time when academic freedom is under attack and university presidents are hiding behind professions of political neutrality like so many ostriches with their heads in the sand, Michael has stood tall and championed opposition to the assault on academia and on democracy itself. He's done so through opinion pieces in major news outlets, interviews on television and radio, through essays, public commentary, and through his books. And I do want to point out that none of this is new. Throughout his career, he has combined scholarly rigor with an unusual ability to speak beyond the academy to broader public audiences. In particular, Michael has consistently argued that education is not simply a means of professional advancement, but a practice of freedom. It's one that equips people to engage critically with the world and, crucially, with one another. So these commitments, I would argue, are evident in all his books, but I just want to point to one, Safe Enough Spaces, or as he would say, Safe Enough Spaces, a pragmatist approach to inclusion, free speech, and political correctness on college campuses. So in that work, Michael rejects the false dichotomy between inclusion and free expression. Instead, he argues that colleges and universities must create environments that are safe enough for students to feel included, but also to take intellectual risks, encounter challenging ideas, and engage in meaningful disagreement. A university or college, he suggests, should neither shelter students from every discomfort nor expose them to needless harm. Instead, it should cultivate the conditions under which learning can flourish through dialogue, debate, and mutual respect. And Michael's commitment to democratic culture extends well beyond the classroom, where he still teaches, I should say. I don't know that many university presidents who do so. As the United States approaches its 250th anniversary, he has spearheaded Wesleyan's Democracy 250 initiative, a series of conversations, lectures, and public programs designed to encourage reflection on the meaning and the future of American democracy. The project asks students, faculty, and citizens not only to examine our nation's history, but also to consider their own responsibilities as participants in democratic life. Through these efforts, Michael has emphasized that higher education should not merely transmit knowledge, it should cultivate informed, engaged citizens capable of sustaining democratic institutions, especially in times of challenge and uncertainty. And perhaps even more ambitiously, Michael has championed Democracy Summer, and this is a nationwide, nonpartisan initiative that seeks to place students in election offices, civic organizations, and public service programs across the country. Developed through Wesleyan and its partners, Democracy Summer combines education with public engagement, giving students practical experience in election administration, voter access, civic communication, and democratic participation. Now, Michael has described the project as part of higher education's obligation to defend the conditions that make free inquiry possible. So rather than responding to democratic erosion with cynicism or simply throwing one's hands up, Democracy Summer encourages students to become active stewards of democratic institutions and processes, getting them engaged and making them aware that they can have a positive contribution. Now, what's striking about these initiatives is that they bring together themes that have animated Michael's work for decades: education as a practice of freedom, intellectual openness, civic responsibility, and the conviction that democracy is not self-sustaining. We have to give it the oxygen to keep it alive. It requires citizens willing to participate, institutions willing to defend their independence, and, crucially, leaders like Michael willing to encourage dialogue across difference. These are not only educational values, they are also, I would argue, the foundations of peace and justice. In recent years, these commitments have taken on a particular urgency. Across the country, debates over academic freedom, free speech, and the role of universities have become increasingly contentious. Michael has emerged as one of the most visible defenders of the idea that universities serve democracy best when they remain places of intellectual independence and robust inquiry. He has repeatedly argued that freedom of expression depends not only on legal protections, but also on a culture that welcomes diverse viewpoints and encourages people to engage one another in good faith. And I think that's part of the key, that you have to be able to disagree, but you have to be able to do so in good faith. Michael has also been an important public voice in confronting the resurgence of anti-Semitism in American public life and on college campuses. Drawing on both his experience as a historian and as president of Wesleyan, he has spoken candidly about the ways anti-Semitism continues to adapt to changing political and cultural circumstances while retaining its capacity to marginalize, threaten, and dehumanize. He has argued that universities have a responsibility to take anti-Semitism seriously, not as an abstract issue or as a one-size-fits-all accusation, but as a real and complex problem affecting students, faculty, and the broader civic culture. And here again, what's notable about Michael's stance is that he has refused to separate the struggle against anti-Semitism from the broader defense of democratic values. He has consistently maintained that universities must be places where Jewish students can feel secure and respected, while also preserving the open exchange of ideas that defines academic life. In moments of heightened tension and polarization, he has rejected both indifference and censorship, instead insisting on the difficult work of education, dialogue, and principled leadership. To my mind, what makes Michael's voice so compelling and important right now is that his views on what makes for effective education and functioning democracy are neither doctrinaire nor partisan. He has criticized censorship and conformity wherever he sees them. He has defended diversity, equity, and inclusion while also defending debate. He has challenged universities to be more accessible and more democratic while simultaneously resisting efforts to subordinate scholarship and teaching to political agendas. At a moment when so many institutions have chosen silence or caution, Michael has chosen the bold course to speak loudly in defense of his values. These are not only academic concerns. Michael's work informs us that pursuit of peace and justice is one that requires intellectual and moral practices. This pursuit requires us to remain open to learning from others. It requires us to resist fear and dogmatism. And it requires us to create communities in which disagreement does not become dehumanization. As we heard, Philip Scheffler devoted his professional life to those ideals, and as we've heard, it should not be lost on us that at this moment, 60 Minutes, the show Scheffler was best known for, has itself fallen victim to the censorial trends which imperil our democracy. The pursuit of peace and justice depends upon our ability to resist authoritarian impulses, to confront difficult truths, to listen to one another, and to imagine a future that is more inclusive and more humane than our present. Michael Roth embodies these virtues and has enacted them as a scholar, an educator, a leader in higher education, and as a tireless advocate for democratic culture. I'm always proud to tell people that I work at Wesleyan because Michael is our president, and I do so often to colleagues at other universities who really don't feel very good about their leadership or their views. But I'd have to say I'm even more proud that I'm able to call Michael my friend and my fellow congregant here at CBSRZ. And so it is for me with humility and great pride that I have the opportunity to offer on behalf of the congregation Beth Shalom Roth Zedek community the 2026 Philip Scheffler Pursuers of Peace and Justice Award for Michael. Wow! Wow, wow, wow. Thank you. Oh, wait, I get to do it. See you. Telling you, Rabbi, that's my favorite thing. I'm going to try to turn this off so I have a microphone on my shirt. Let's see if I can do that. Maybe not. All right, let's try. I don't want to get feedback. Let's see if this works. Thank you for coming. Oh, there we go. Whoa! Thank you for coming. And I have some notes that I should have out here. But it's great. It's great to be here. So thank you. So my favorite movies to teach is Stella Dallas, and in Stella Dallas there is this extraordinarily painful scene in which there's a birthday party, and one by one they call and say that they're not coming. And I've seen this film 15 times because I teach it, and it's always so horrible. So I was leaving the house this morning. I said, the car says, "Who do you think is going to be there?" I said, "No one. No one's coming. It's Sunday's beautiful day. No one's going to be there. It's going to be so embarrassing." So thank you so much for coming. I want to thank my fellow congregants, my fellow scrollers, the Wesleyan folks who are here, even my bandmates. I'm in a geezer rock band. We're always looking for a gig. So if anybody here wants us to come and play classic rock and roll, the Louise Brown update there, we just need some help with our equipment because we're all old.
But it's great to be with you. You know, I'm here. I was telling Henry Gottlieb this before. I'm here because I went to the shul in Middletown. The first fall, 2007, went to the temple in Middletown, and second day of Rosh Hashanah. I walk in, and there's no one there. Morning services, like almost no one. Maybe they had 10 people. Big place, you know, not like this, but you know, big place. So I get there. And the Gabbai says to me, "Oh, the President Wesleyan is here," which is already a miracle for, you know, the Jewish President Wesleyan. And so he says, and I'm a little embarrassed because I'm coming. I just want to come. He says, "Where should you sit?" I mean, it's 95% of the seats are open. I said, "I can sit anywhere." He says, "No, you'll have my seat. I'll stand." Like the house of guilt. And so so then I came here, and the door was locked, and I knocked on the door. It was a morning, Saturday morning, and Henry Gottlieb comes there, and he's wearing a T-shirt that says "Fuck fascism." And I said, "I'm in the right place." So thank you. It's great to be with you. The only problem is, I don't know if my mother's watching in Florida. She just turned 98 this week. But you know, people. I understand. Okay, the justice you're pursuing. Okay, you've been pursuing it for a long time. Peace. I'm not known among my friends and family as a peacemaker. I was in Los Angeles yesterday at a conference, and there were any questions from the audience? No one had a question. So I raised my hand. The panelist said, "Uh-oh." I hadn't been in this place in 15 years. And I was like, "Uh-oh, there he goes." Michael Conflict Roth. I like to think of it as an ambivalence, not conflict, but that's for my therapist. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, I think I gave the title, Leaving the Narrow Place. My scroller friends know that I'm obsessed with the narrow place, Mitzrayim, leaving Egypt. Alan always teases me that I focus too much on the wilderness. I'm one of those guys who don't want to get to the promised land. I think it's a disaster, as I think the facts have borne this out. So I wanted to talk to you about like this thing that we do in scrollers and Jews do with Torah, and lots of other people do it as well, of knowing that two things that seem in tension with each other can both be true, right? Because I've been thinking about this, especially with the 60 Minutes stuff, that people seem to think, well, if X is true, I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have to do all those things if X is true. And if I don't believe X is true, then I have to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. They feel as if you can't hold two truths together when they're in tension. And so I wanted to talk to you about why that's so problematic in a couple of different areas. Higher education, because that's I know about, and civil society, of which higher education is a part. And then a couple of other areas. I won't speak too long, probably. You never know. Kari will go like that at some point if I go too long. But you know, everybody knows that higher education has many problems, right? It's not a perfect place. There are lots of things wrong with colleges and universities. We'd be hard-pressed to find another sector of American culture and economy that's better. Maybe women's basketball. Well, no, there's a lot of controversy. The Knicks, yeah, okay. But it's hard to find another sector that actually performs at that level. Nonetheless, there are a lot of things about higher education that are problematic, from cost to political correctness to sometimes being disengaged from the rest of the country's political and moral concerns. Lots of things that are wrong with higher education. In 2016, I wrote a piece for the think 16 or 17, I wrote a piece for wound up in the Wall Street Journal on why we should have an affirmative action program for conservatives in higher education. This pleased no one. No one. And, you know, and actually an op-ed editor once said to me, I am almost impossible for me to publish a thing that you, a college president, can write because you have to please everyone, he said. And that makes for a crappy op-ed. So I wrote an op-ed that pleased no one, which makes it very good because people read it because people read things they hate. You know, oh, I'm so mad, I'm going to read it again. Henry Gottlieb is a perfect example of that, right? He comes to Torah every week and says, this is nonsense. Every week. So you get, you know, people read things they get upset by. So this is an affirmative action program for conservatives because a friend of mine who was on the board of Wesleyan, we became friends, he pointed out to me all the ways in which colleges and universities assume a kind of progressivism, leftism that maybe sometimes is appropriate, but it's really just a reflex. It's like it's done without thinking. It's done as a prejudice, a bias. And when he first told me, he said, why in the history department at Wesleyan, Ethan's in the history department at Wesleyan, why are there not more conservatives? Or anyone who said they're conservative. And I said to him, kind of smugly, I guess, that, you know, do you know any conservatives who would spend 8 to 10 years in graduate school and take a job, the opening salary of which at that time was $70,000? And he said, well, no, nobody's that stupid. I'm a conservative. And when, you know, kids were graduating from college and getting internships that paid as much as an assistant professor. But I thought that seemed like not a terrible argument, but, sorry, am I not?
I'm sorry.
Can you not hear me well? Oh, okay. Sorry? Okay. Is it okay in the back? You can hear? Okay. The problem is that, as I saw it at the time, was that faculty committees tend to find the people who make them feel most comfortable and then hire those people. And those people tend to have the same political views as the hiring committee. And we've seen this, you see this in a lot of places. It's particularly pernicious in education, where you want a variety of views. It's particularly galling when the professors are also saying that they value diversity. You know, and then they actually create a monoculture. And so I called for a affirmative action program because I thought you actually had to be intentional about it. When Kari and I were graduate students at Princeton long ago, my department, history department, said, we'd love to hire women, but we hire the best. They all just have the same biological equipment that we like, the men said, these old guys. And we were incredulous. And then they said, well, we hired Natalie Davis. We hired a woman. So shows that we don't have prejudice. So, and Harvard always said, we have Harvey Mansfield there. He's 90 years old. It shows we're not prejudiced. Like, it's crazy. It's like some of my best friends are, you know, that kind of argument. And so I really thought we needed to combat the political prejudices at colleges and universities to create an intellectual monoculture because it's really pernicious for teaching and for research. We just don't ask certain questions. Now, people, Charles Salas is here. You remember he pushed back when I wrote that article. He said, you know, it's not like you have to be a Marxist to teach Marx, or you have to be a Catholic to teach Aquinas. The second one was aimed at me, because I teach Aquinas. You know? And it's true, you don't have to be a medieval Catholic to teach Aquinas, but it helps to not just have people with one set of political or religious views teaching everything. I think John Stuart Mill said that it's not enough just to value the diversity of ideas in the abstract. We should value meeting people and getting to know people who have ideas different from our own. It makes a big difference when you talk to someone who believes this stuff rather than someone who's cheerleading for this stuff, as I do, and I teach a great books course. So on the one hand, it's true that higher education has a political bias problem. I think it's still the case. At Wesleyan, we've made some progress. We raised a few $1 million from the person I was talking about before, who became friends, to bring more conservative speakers and faculty, and we've hired a few people, but it's been slow. It's been slow. And so I take some comfort at Wesleyan in the fact that initially no one liked this op-ed, everybody was angry at me, but now there's a real debate in the faculty at Wesleyan and other places about the importance of intellectual diversity. There is actually a conversation about this bias. And I think that that's how you get over biases, especially in a professional situation. When people become aware of the biases, they're more they want to act like good professionals. They want to be intentional and create more political diversity. So that's true that we have a problem of political monoculture. I hope it's getting a little bit better. But it's also true that the government assault on higher education is a disaster, undermining the very foundations of what we do: freedom of association, inquiry, and expression. When you have people canceling classes because they're afraid to teach certain things, when you have ideas of intellectual or political quotas in departments, that would be enforced by federal government. This is a disaster, I think, because it'll undermine the practice of freedom, as Ethan described it, the phrase I used in a book called The Student. It'll undermine that practice because the government is going to make things worse by trying to use this real problem. It is true we have a political bias problem. To use that real problem as an excuse for further government control. To give you another example, it's very clear that there aren't a lot of men who go into pediatrics. I don't know about you, but I would not want the government saying, okay, we're going to make all this orthopedic, because there are many more men in orthopedics, we're going to make them treat children. It'd be a disaster. All these guys who don't care about the patient as a whole, treating a 5-year-old? Are there any orthopedics in the audience? Orthopedists? Orthodontists, I think maybe. But you see what I mean? You don't want the government having a litmus test. So there are both things are true, that you have a problem, but also that the government intervention is a mistake. Civil society is another area. More broadly, I just came back from the Getty Center, where I used to work, and I was urging people at the Getty Center to be more aggressive in defending the autonomy of civil society, because what's happening in our country when you have a government aiming at more control over law firms, media companies, colleges and universities, the Boy Scouts, you have the erosion of this very vital sector of American society that defends freedom simply by existing somewhat autonomously from government control. I mean, Tocqueville noticed this in the 1800s, and people have remarked about it for many, many years. It could be local libraries, it could be school districts, that the autonomy of civil society is so vital. And yet it can also be true that in America, civil society has also functioned to protect racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny. That's also true. That these same groups who don't have allegiance to the federal government can do pernicious things. I think the fact that those two things are true does not mean we shouldn't now, in this context, defend the autonomy of civil society against encroachment by the federal government. And I say this, I talk in these terms about the importance of defending American democracy. I sometimes, since I speak a lot at universities, have people in the audience and they say, "Fair," or something like that. They say, you know, American democracy it's never been fair. It's never been equitable. It's always been filled with racists and anti-Semites and corruption. What follows from that, they think, is you shouldn't have to, you shouldn't try to defend it. But it doesn't follow from that you shouldn't try to defend it. I mean, what follows from it is that there's a lot of work to be done to improve the health of civil society, and the first thing you have to do is to defend it from a very powerful federal government. The federal government of the United States is extraordinarily powerful, especially when it doesn't obey its own rules. I mean, it's absolutely frightening. And I think that's why we see around the country so much what Tim Snyder called anticipatory obedience. Because people don't know where the next shoe will drop. They're afraid. And so on a tactical level, people say sometimes, well, maybe you should not speak up so much because Wesleyan's not being attacked. Not a Jewish thing to do, but I do it anyway. Wesleyan's not being attacked. One of my colleague presidents said their policy, a very distinguished school, I don't like it, but very distinguished, she says, our policy is not to be the tallest blade of grass. Well, that just means I want this guy to get it, or I want that person to get hurt. Totally unethical. But practically speaking, one can understand it. So I think that standing up for civil society at a time when it's being attacked it should be something we do, not because we don't know that there are problems in civil society. Standing up for higher education is not something we refuse to do because there are problems in higher education. There are problems in these sectors. But if we don't defend them, if we don't ensure they continue to operate without expressed allegiance to the federal government, I fear that the path of authoritarianism in this country will be extraordinarily easy. I know it's complicated because sometimes people are fighting for their own thing without as big a mouth as I have. They want to do it on a low key. And I try to respect that. I mean, because there are different ways of doing these things. I'll give you an example. 10 days ago or so, a couple of weeks ago, maybe it is now, the White House announced that the Smith College is being investigated because they admit trans girls, trans women. And I thought the Iran war was going badly, so you know what surefire popular thing you could do is attract trans people. And so I don't know the President Smith, and it's very odd in a way because Wellesley does the same thing, Mount Holyoke does the same thing, Scripps College does the same thing. I mean, but only Smith at the women's colleges. So if you're the president of Wellesley, what do? You say, do I not say anything? So I wrote to the president of Smith and said, I'm sorry this is happening. It's really scary when the government announces it's investigating you. I said, do you want anyone to do anything? Do you want people to call it? And she said, thanks for writing. I really appreciate it. But we're going to handle this in the courts. It's a litigation process. And I think on a practical on the practical side, I get that. I think that's I was moved to actually speak out so much almost a year and a half ago when that poor young woman outside of Tufts got swept off the street by masked ICE agents. She's around our daughter's age. Sophie, who was bat mitzvahed right here. And I see this kid, she's scared to death. A bunch of guys come and grab her and they take her off, But the president of Tufts, he wanted to just get her out of jail. when I wrote to him, he was not so happy to have Michael Roth championing his cause. He wanted to get her out of jail. So I get that. It's just on the purely practical or tactical level, it's important to get somebody out of jail or to end the investigation of trans kids at Smith. But I'm afraid if everybody does that, then the precedent of the government being able to push people around in this way just becomes normalized, just becomes a normal thing. And so sometimes I say, you know, I can't blame a parent for paying a ransom when their kid is kidnapped. But I don't praise the terms of the deal once the deal is made. And so I find myself in public talking about the terms of the deal. And sometimes there is a conflict with the person who's just trying to get the person released, getting the kid free. And I don't know what to do about that, so I say you have to have these two things true at once. I have the ambivalence, because I don't know how to solve that corruption. At the Getty Center, I got a lot of pushback from the president of the Getty Trust, because I said they're doing all these great things right there on the campus. They have right now a wonderful exhibition on the black arts movement. But if you do that in some places in the United States right now, the federal government will say you're in violation of civil rights statutes because you have to do a white arts movement. UCLA, 5 minutes from the Getty. Medical school's being investigated. Why? They have too many black people in the entering class. That's it. Straightforward. I think the president of Getty should be talking about that. She doesn't agree. She thinks they're doing good stuff at the Getty. They're leading by example. They created a whole network of black art history fellowships. They have an international program that's fantastic. I mean, kind of decentering European perspectives on our history. Really interesting, great things. I think they also have responsibility to say, you should be able to do that in Chester, and you should be able to do that in Boston. You should be able to do that. But there are tensions around that. There's certainly tensions around that. And maybe the last example I give you that, yeah, because they're probably Barry Weiss fans here, right? Because many of you like Israel. Barry Weiss sees only the good in Israel. And she's smart cookie. Pittsburgh, Squirrel Hill, I think it is, right? I met her when she was before she talked only to billionaires, and clearly a smart, ambitious, thoughtful person, and she built a free press as a kind of outlet for Zionist news and pro-Israel reporting, and really good reporting at times. I get it in my box every morning, for free. I know. I thought that would be funny, but so I think you could say that Barry Weiss is like an interesting figure in American journalism, has been, and also point out that she's doing the work of the devil, that is the federal government, in this case, of not only destroying 60 Minutes, which right today for this occasion is so extraordinary. You had in this congregation Phil and Morley Safer, and an organization that proudly, the cliche is spoke truth to power. But in their case, it wasn't a cliche. I mean, they put their heads in the mouths of the tigers and went to the battlefields, and so it may be true that the average age of the 60-minute viewer, I saw this online, I'm not sure it's true, is 65, and that is a problem. It is true that news has to be modernized, and there are different ways to do it. But it's also true that this is a blatant attempt to curry favor with the Trump administration so as to make the business prospects better for the parent company as they pursue mergers. And so I think that leaving the narrow place is being willing to recognize that truths can be in tension with one another, and that when they're in tension with one another, one can point out those tensions while at the same time not giving up one's responsibility to take action. In other words, you can imagine, like, at Western we have these people, a smart undergraduate, said, oh, I can see all the problems with this, and whatever you do that's going to be problematic is the word. Whatever you do, it's going to be fraught. Whatever you do, it's going to be problematic. As if that relieves you of the obligation to act. It does not. It does not. We are encouraging student participation in the electoral system this summer. We are building something called Democracy 250, or with institutions all over the country. And of course, being a lefty group of people at Wesleyan and my colleagues at many other places say, democracy, you've never had a democracy. You don't know what a democracy is. I say, duh, is my response. Of course. We don't, of course it's fraud. Of course right now there's a massive effort to take away political power, just the franchise from black people. I mean, these are all true, but that doesn't relieve one, I don't think, of the obligation to act. As a citizen, and in my case, since I have a bima, I don't want to say a bully bima, bully bima, I never thought about that, to actually talk about it, to encourage people to act, because the students will say, well, why should I be involved? Why should I work for... I mean, the Atlantic tells me that we should vote for Susan Collins. That was kind of a joke, but not really. So you don't have to laugh at that one. Because the Planner's such a, he said, yeah, it's such a flawed candidate. The Atlantic has 6 articles on that in 48 hours. It would be like if they said to my ex-wife, one of them, you think he's a good university president? One of them would not, it wouldn't be good if they called. Actually, both of them would be terrible. So that's the kind of reporting we get. What does that encourage? I tell you that not just to try to be funny unsuccessfully, but because it encourages cynicism. And cynicism is the best excuse for inaction. I'm not going to get involved because it's so corrupt. Where the real answer is, I have to get involved because it's so corrupt. I have to try to make it a little better. Justice, justice you shall pursue. One of the kinds of things we wrestle with in scrollers. Why twice? Why is it justice, justice? Sometimes we say, because it's so important. It has to be said twice. But maybe it's because it's so hard. It's so hard. Because even when you pursue justice, you have to do stuff that's not just, not pretty, not perfect. Maybe you have to participate in systems that are and hold your nose while doing so. But justice, justice you shall pursue, the Torah tells us. And that means, I think, speaking out against injustice. It means trying to participate in systems that make injustice less painful for the most vulnerable. It means working together as neighbors, as colleagues, as co-religionists, as friends, to defend the systems that exist by participating in them, not because they're perfect, but because we aspire to make them better. So for all those reasons, I'm extremely honored to receive this award, and I thank you for giving it to me. Well, thank you. So I get to do it again. This is my favorite thing. Please be seated. I say that at graduation so much I feel like a rabbi. I don't tell anyone at Wesleyan. So I can take questions, yeah?
You want me to moderate?
Sure, go ahead. Why don't you do it?
So we have time
I told you, Susan. My bubble of Michael.
Michael the Elder.
Michael the Elder. I wanted you to say it.
So first of all, thank you, Michael, for everything that you do. Thank you, Michael, for everything you do. Studying with you is a treat. But a harsh question. So we've been studying together 5, 6, 7 years?
We're 15.
Who are you? Who are you in our text? Who do you identify with?
Hey, who do I identify with in the Torah? God. No. No. I couldn't resist. You know, I was reading about, no, I can't, you know, oh my goodness. Aaron, little brother, you know, stoic in the face of extraordinary loss. But I say that because you've asked me the question. I really, when we study together, I try to think, what about this perspective? What about that? What about Miriam's perspective? What about Dina's perspective? What about Joseph's perspective? I was just, because we had the Midrash person last week, I'm forgetting her, Leah Berkowitz was with us, and so I was reading these Midrashim about Joseph. And, you know, because we talked about, you know, one of the things we don't talk about enough in the Bible is how beautiful Joseph was, how physically charismatic he was. So I admire Joseph. But I try then to think about the different ways in which people, as they're portrayed in the Torah, experience the world, and how in the end, happily, we don't have to choose one perspective. That's the thing, right? You can take these Aaron's and Moses's and try to think through from different perspectives, which I think is our job as interpreters, not to get the lesson, but to get the multiplicity of lessons. Other questions? Is right in the center. Mm-hmm. I could also repeat the question if it doesn't work. I'll just repeat it.
Here
we go.
All right, we're on. Unless I misheard you, I believe you used the term anticipatory obedience.
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Oh, sure. Thank you. It's a term that Tim Snyder, the Canadian, he's gone from Yale to Toronto, right? And he wrote a book called On Tyranny, as did I, but his sold. In that book, he talks about the path of authoritarianism. And many people have noticed this before, that authoritarianism, tyranny, is successful when people start to obey things before they have to. So to give you an example, since we're among friends, like the presidents of Vanderbilt and WashU, they have been like rushing to Trumpify themselves. Now they use Trump soap, they use Trump shampoo, I exaggerate just a little, because they really believe in the agenda from the White House, or because there's a lot of money to be made. And that's really extreme version. But another version would be closing all your DEI offices before anybody asks you to. And now we see it even worse examples. It's kind of people do these things out of fear. That's anticipatory obedience. You obey because you think they're coming after you. And then there's more like corruption or hypocrisy, which is universities that are slashing their humanities programs because they know it pleases the federal government, but they also want to save money and slash the humanities programs. So, so that's what it is. You're welcome. David, right there. There we go.
So first, your courage is admirable.
Thank you.
But my question is specific to Wesleyan and not to the whole broader civic society. So you have, and perhaps more so now than 10 years ago, your progressive faculty and your conservative faculty, your progressive students, your conservative students. What do you consider to be success? How do they influence each other? How do you measure that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I had a faculty member come to see me several years ago now, and a great guy, a great teacher and citizen of the university, great scholar, and he came to see me and he said to me, "Do you realize I am the only person in the social science building that goes to church regularly?" And he could see I was like going through my mental Rolodex, you know, thinking, what about that guy? Well, Dick Buell used to, you know, blessed memory, used to come to Torah study, but he was a churchgoer, but he had retired, and other people, and whether it's exactly right anymore or not, his point to me was, you have people teaching about religion and society, and you don't have any people who practice Christianity or Catholicism. And that seemed to me a real big problem, actually. And so making a space for more conversations about that problem is really, that for me was success. That was Dayenu. You know, that was enough that would, to just get the conversation rolling. And then I thought smart people would actually realize if they had biases, then they would work to counteract them. I am asked, though, sometimes, well, how many people vote Republican on your faculty? And I don't know, actually. I'm not allowed to ask, and I don't want to know. If I had to guess, I would say maybe 1 or 2 out of a few hundred. No, I think faculty, not staff, but I mean in the national elections, but I don't think that's the same. I think being a conservative is not the same like who you vote for. Although I do think it is a problem that in a polarized society, the university, and not just Wesleyan, it represents, you know, maybe it's 52%, maybe it's 46%, but there's a lot of people missing then. Now, a lot of Americans believe, you know, in fairies, and they believe in things that are, they believe in intelligent design, things you wouldn't teach in university. So I'm not thinking we have to be completely representative, but I do think that there are opportunities still to create more conversation by having more people from diverse backgrounds. But I don't try to measure to see what would be successful when we would be done. I think partly because it's illegal, and partly because I'm not sure it's easily measurable, because you might hire, I don't know, Ethan as a young person might start off in a certain political, an intellectual way, but now is doing things quite different than when he started, in scholarly ways. And so I think there's, you know, most faculty are there for a very long time. The staff is more politically diverse, I think, but I guess what feels like success to me is when there are good conversations about this issue or other issues in which I can hear a variety of perspectives being voiced. Because what we know from social psychology is that when you have people of all the same opinion in discussing things, they get more extreme. In order to stand out, you have to get more extreme. And that, I think, is counter-education.
As a veteran of student protest during the Vietnam War, I'm wondering how you differentiate disagreements with the policies of Netanyahu and Trump and anti-Semitism on campus. It seems to me that the political regime is using the protest against it is using anti-Semitism as a screen for fighting the people who disagree with them.
Yeah, well, we definitely agree about that. I wrote a piece that I think the Times gave it a title just along those lines, saying that anti-Semitism is a screen or a myth that the Trump administration is using. It's not a myth that there's anti-Semitism. One of the strangest things for me during the Gaza protests was that I had all these Jewish kids coming to see me who saying, I didn't think there was any anti-Semitism left. And I looked at them like, where? What? And they were so earnest. I said, where did you grow up? Scarsdale. I mean, but I was surprised. Even in Scarsdale, I thought, at least they would tell you. Don't go over to Mamaroneck or New Rochelle. Hey. I don't know. So, but there was that feeling that since they had never, and I think some of these kids, they had never encountered anti-Israel activity. And so to them it felt anti-Jewish. I knew, as these events unfolded on campus, that there's roughly the same, if not more, a higher percentage of Jews protesting than there were Jews not protesting. In fact, Kari and I were walking through the encampment one morning. I walk through the encampment every day, a few times a day. But in the morning, we would walk through with our dog. And one morning, we'd walk through and somebody screams, "Murder!" Well, I'm used to this. You know, it's like, pizza! You know, I don't hear. Kari whips around. She's like, "What did you say?" And our dog Lola and I are like, no, stop, no conflict. I'm getting a war for peace. This student was off the Haraka, actually, and technical term. We wind up walking on. A little later, I get, I think, from Eval or something, emails apologizing for what happened. And they said, and if you want to know why there's an Israeli in a tent underneath your window protesting, I'm glad to come and tell you. This is magic, right? I said, of course, please come and we talk. He explained he's very anti-Netanyahu. So on the one hand, I think from the Trump administration, it's totally disingenuous. The guy breaks bread with Nazis. And, I mean, you know, Christian nationalism is going to come for the Jews. It's coming for the Jews already. It'll come sooner or later. And there are people who use the anti-Israel pass for the anti-Semitism was always there. In other words, it's a way, now they can be anti-Semitic, it's polite. For a while, it wasn't so polite. Now you can be a cool progressive and really be anti-Semitic. So I think it's Netanyahu who has made the world safe for anti-Semites. I don't think anyone has done more for anti-Semitism in my lifetime than Netanyahu. He has legitimated anti-Semitism among the young. And I find it really painful because, like, our daughter goes to pro-Palestinian marches all the time, but she's uncomfortable coming to this shul because she thinks we're too pro-Israel, officially. That we don't actually denounce war crimes if they're committed by Israelis. We only denounce them if they're committed by non-Israelis. And I find that painful because this is a kid who's like, she's certainly more observant than anyone else in our family. She feels deeply about her Judaism. And to her, it leads her to being anti-Zionist. Because for her, Israel is Netanyahu, since she's a little kid. For us, Israel is 67, Israel is 73. I mean, it's a different set of orientation points. So all of that is to say, I think the government's use of anti-Semitism is blatantly manipulative and will be bad for the Jews. But I also think that there is a real anti-Semitism that should be denounced whenever we can denounce it. And I try to be, I don't just put the shtick on for you guys. Like when I talk at the Goya show audiences, I don't know supposed to say that. When I talk in non-Jewish audiences, I, as one Israeli said to me, "You're using Jew speak," as if that was a problem. Because he thought. But I want people to know that I'm Jewish when I speak about these issues. I think it's really important. I wrote for the Forward a couple of times. I tried to publish in Jewish Currents, and they said, "We're not for you." That's fine. But I do think I think that's what it means, two things at once. It's being used in the worst manipulative way, and it's also real, anti-Semitism. Is there a microphone coming? Microphone coming. Okay, go over there and we'll come to you next. Yes?
So the last time I saw the Michael, last time I saw the Michael Roth show was at my reunion last year.
Just put it, it's on, you just have to speak into it directly.
Does everyone? Okay, better?
Yes, it all depends what you're going to say next.
Okay. I don't know if this is statistically correct, but when I was at Wesleyan, I had transferred from St. John's so I could sit in Victor Gurevich's class as one of the few nerdy philosophy majors, mostly because people said, well, if you want to do studio, like, be a philosophy major, you got all the credits anyway. Okay. When I come back to my reunion, suddenly philosophy's cool. All these people are talking like they were
Because of
philosophy
Ethan.
majors. I don't think that was true. I don't know. It might be true.
I thought it was cool.
I mean, but
I didn't have any friends.
do you, but you know, I mean, do you know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
2 weeks later, I was fortunate enough to get Obama tickets, and I thought, wait, these two, this is like, these two would be a show, you and Obama. And then Buttigieg, and I thought, this is a podcast, and now Mondami. It's like, there's just so much enthusiasm and energy and thinking, and it was nice that it was at Wesleyan. I
Thank
didn't know
you.
what to expect.
Thank you. It is true that philosophy has had a resurgence in many places, and Wesleyan is one of them, partly because they're doing what I think we might call practical philosophy, but in a very interesting way. Like, so I was a Victor Gurevich student, and he was a dear friend. His granddaughter was my student, and she just graduated. And now we have a class called How to Live a Good Life, Living a Good Life. It's taught by 3 or 4 philosophers, and they actually talk about philosophy as a practice rather than just as like a study of texts. And it's very popular, and the students, they vote at the end, like, do you want to live like an existentialist or a Stoic or an Aristotelian? And I know it's not the most philosophical way of deciding, but what it shows is the students are really engaged in thinking about how philosophical issues intersect with their lives. And I think that's a really great thing.
I'm from a generation where I feel, stopped the Vietnam War. And I think the movement was entirely because of the universities and colleges. Everything originated there. And today, the universities are cowering, and there's too many issues. We need the universities because standing alone to stop this administration by a bunch of old hippies marching down Broadway is not enough. We need the universities, and I don't understand why they're not more involved.
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer. We've gone to the No Kings protests, and like you, we see lots of older people. Although in Middletown, there was a nice little contingent from Wesleyan came down the hill, and you know, I think that some of the leaders of the protests around the Gaza invasion some of those leaders were intimidated by government repression, and there's certainly a withdrawal from action by many students who are afraid, especially their international students. And then there's, you know, the Vietnam protests were fueled by physical danger to students, a draft. And so, I mean, I was surprised there were no protests, or almost no protests on college campuses about the war in Iran. And I think part of it is that for many people it's very abstract. They're not thinking about, are they going to go? Are they going to be called up? So, but I agree with you that the energy of young people is vital to break these trends in our democracy that we've been talking about. And that's why we're doing this Democracy 250, the Democracy Summer, trying to get people involved, not so much in protest, but in participation.
We could do more questions when we're schmoozing, but I think we've come to the end, so let's thank you.
Oh, I would talk. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Wow, wow, wow. There's food in the back. I should take my microphone.